Well, good evening, folks. Thanks for coming. It's been a tradition of ours to get together once a month during the session and sort of tell you a little bit about what we do in our committees and things like that, but more to hear what questions you might have or interest you might have in particular issues and have a dialogue back and forth. And, sometimes we have 12, 15 people here. Sometimes we have a handful of people, and that's fine with us.
Introduce yourself.
And so anyway,
Introduce yourself.
I'm going to.
Okay.
Just talking about process.
All right.
And I'm Trevor Squirrel. I think probably most of you know who I am. I'm in my fourth biennium. And I'll let you introduce yourself, and then I'll go
All right.
back and talk myself.
Great. I'm Edye Graning. I am a first-term representative from Jericho, and I serve on the Commerce and Economic Development Committee.
I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and we spend the money. And this is my second biennium on appropriations. And my first 4 years were on natural resources, which is now called environment and energy because they combined a couple of different committees for this session. In our committee right now, we're in the midst of working on what's called the FY24 budget. And we just finished up a couple weeks ago what's called the budget adjustment. So every year we pass a budget, which is for the fiscal year, which begins July 1st through June of the next year. And then in January, when we first come in, we do an adjustment to that budget. So departments and agencies, and even from outside groups that may feel they have a need that wasn't identified through the budget process before, can come to us in the House and say, we want to make some adjustments to the budget in the fiscal year that we're in. So we had done that, and we had passed it out on the House floor, and it went to the Senate, because the Senate does their thing with it, and we apparently they just got, I think they're voting on it tomorrow.
Oh, good.
I think it's on the Senate floor tomorrow. Typically what happens when a bill goes out of a House, it comes to the Senate, and goes to the other side, there are always typically changes that are made to a bill. And the normal process for that is for the other body to offer amendments to what you, so this, if the Senate gets a House bill, say, well, yeah, we agree with this and mostly, but we propose this. And they can go back and forth a couple of times. In the case of budget bills, we tend not to do that because there are too many moving parts, and you just can't have all these amendments going back and forth forever. So typically what we'll do probably after the Senate passes it, it'll be different than what we passed on the House side. I got a preview of it, and it's not substantially different, but it is different. And typically what we'll do is we'll say we want a conference committee, which means the leadership of my appropriations committee, which is the chair, vice chair, and the ranking member, and the chair, vice chair, and the ranking member of the Senate committee, they go into a room and they sit down and they hash out the differences in the
So
two
is it
versions.
Six people or?
6 people. Hash out the differences between the two. And I've never known them not to come to some resolution of that and some agreement to that. And then it gets presented on the House floor and the Senate floor. But this is what we did. We came together. We had a conversation about these different issues and differences, and we resolved them this way. And then both bodies will vote on that, typically pass, with some debate, of course, and then that goes to the governor, and away you go. And so we did that with the budget adjustment. Now we're working on the actual budget, okay, which is about an $8.3 billion budget, which is general funds, taxes you pay, if you will, and federal monies and other things that come into it, but that's total. Actually, general fund money, which is sort of taxes that we collect from corporations and individuals, is only about 25% of the budget. The rest of it's from other sources, such as the federal government. But anyway, it starts on the House. We work through it, and that's what we're doing right now. We get a recommended budget from the governor. Governor says, we visited with all our departments and agencies across state government. And we gave them guidelines, we came back, we had a conversation, and then decide on what that's gonna be, and then it gets presented to House Appropriations. And we go through that, and then we ask departments and agencies to come in and present their budget, okay? So they have to come in and speak to it, we ask the questions, and those of us on committee have certain budget portfolios that we're responsible for. I have the criminal justice system. I also have all the environmental departments and agencies, or agency, and which is a fairly large portfolio, but that's what I'm doing. I had the criminal justice portfolio before. So we go through that process, and we'll be going through that process for the next 3 or 4 weeks. We get input. We ask the committees of jurisdiction, policy committees, to weigh in on their sections of the budget and tell us what they think. Do they agree? Do they not agree? Are there things not there that we should consider adding? And of course, we're always working within a box that says we have this amount of revenue to work with. So we're going to get to a point at some point in time where we say, okay, everything we have on the table is bigger than the box. And then we start making decisions and having that type of a conversation also. We vote it out, goes to Senate, and goes through that same process again. So that's my work day right now. So.
I have a process question. I've
Yeah.
never thought of this until I heard you describing this process. So you guys are also in the middle of proposing legislation that presumably will pass before the next time you do the budget, right? So you're going to pass laws that go into effect January or next summer or whatever. But do you adjust the budget when you pass something new, or do you do that?
I think that's a good
next
question.
year?
Understand that the budget we're working on right now is what we call the FY24 budget, which starts July 1st, 23. So it's out in the future, right?
Right.
And it'll go through 24 of that. So any bills that come to us, and I was just asking Edye before if she had they voted on a bill today, and I said, well, does it have money in it? Because if it has money in it, it comes to us for review. And and when we take up a bill that has money in it, and we're working on the budget also, or it's gone to the Senate already, and maybe it comes back to us, we will, well, typically that doesn't happen because of crossover, but we'll take that in consideration. If we agree or make changes and it goes on the floor and passes and goes to the Senate, we take that appropriation and make sure it gets added to the budget.
So you add it at the time you pass it?
Yes.
And also.
We make I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and also the very last bill that's passed is the budget. So, in the session.
Oh,
So
really?
Yeah.
So you're doing all this work on it now, but no matter how quickly you get through the work, you won't pass the budget until the very last thing?
The budget won't leave the House until the end of March. And then it goes to the Senate.
Yeah.
So the Senate has it, and so it'll be the middle of May when we make a final decision on the budget.
Does the governor have to sign it after the?
After we get done, the governor will get it from us, and then he has a certain number of days to act on
So
it.
what happens if he vetoes it?
Then we come back.
Then we come back. That's not common, but
Exactly.
but it can happen.
See, you're talking about the process, so
Yeah.
maybe just made me start thinking, well, I wonder how that works.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Very
that's,
good.
so that's how that works. So as we work on legislation that has money in it that comes through our committee, we make sure we track all that, so it all gets added. And there have been occasions where if we don't look really carefully, something gets left off or left out, what have you. So that's my work at this point in time.
Yeah. So we in Commerce and Economic Development do lots of bills at the same time, which is great for a first-year person to try to keep track of all of these new things, and then you're jumping around in which bill, and so I'm overloading my brain every single day and then cramming more into it the next day, which is it's been good. It's been really good. I'm only being a little bit sarcastic. It really has been really good. So we've been working on the VEGI program. We have a bill on that, which is Vermont Economic Growth Incentive. We're going to see if there's some changes to be made to that. Today we passed a bill about captive insurance. Vermont is the second largest host in the world for captive insurance, and think about that like self-insurance, and it's one of the ways that our state gets a lot of income from these businesses from all over the world. So that's been a big learning thing. I know, right? Like, it's been really interesting learning. We're looking at consumer protection. So we are looking at a bill for consumer protection that we're going to look at, and unemployment insurance. And I'm missing something else really important that we've been working on, but that's a gist of what we've been doing. So,
Okay. So at this point, we'd like to hear from you. If you have questions or issues.
Explanation of the VEGE program again?
Vermont Economic Growth Incentive,
tell me what's going on in
So,
that, please.
so it's a bill that is set to sunset, I think, in '24, or a program that's set to sunset in '24, and our committee is looking at, is it incentivizing businesses to grow, to add jobs in Vermont? Is it working? And does it need to be modified? And there are folks who have been working, I'm new, right? There are folks who've been working with this for a while and saying it needs to be modified, and we have had a lot of different testimony. We've had some businesses who have used it to grow and been very successful, like Lawson's and Beta, and I'm going to forget the other companies that came in, but a number of other companies came in and shared just their great experience with it. It has been, for me, I've noticed that it's been allocated $10 to $15 million a year, and we have been giving out about $2 million a year, $2.5 million a year. So for me, I wonder, right, are there businesses who are not accessing it? Is it a system right now where we're just in a low growth situation? But it's been ongoing, right? It has been underused for a long time. So I'm trying to figure out, is there a way to make sure it's used better, or is there a different program that will incentivize business growth in Vermont more? I'm just digging in and figuring it out and asking lots of questions, and sometimes people like to answer them and sometimes they don't.
There is some controversy around.
There is
that,
controversy around that program.
Because I think there's a certain set of folks that feel that, do we really need to help the beta technologies of the world and that have access to money and getting money from outside and things like that. So I don't know where I settle on that, but I just put that out there because there is
But you're saying there's actually more resources there than are being used.
Correct, significantly more.
So the question is, what is holding people back? Would be my question.
Right.
Is it too difficult to access, or?
Yeah, I mean, the really interesting and good parts about it is that, the constraints around it are really to help businesses grow in Vermont that are Vermont businesses, and by that I mean, they want to do good in the environment, in the world. They want to do good in Vermont. They want to be in Vermont. They have really good jobs with good benefits. So there are pieces in there that are constraints that not every business is going to be able to access, and that's probably a really good thing. It's just, is there more opportunity? Is there something that we're missing? I mean, Beta doesn't have competition, right? There isn't another electric plane company in Vermont, so they're not pulling jobs from other Vermont businesses, and they're growing in Vermont. So, there are arguments to be made for both sides. And my perspective is, if we can grow good businesses that want to be in Vermont, that are good for Vermont, and that offer really good jobs, that's a good thing for us, as a state, and it takes some of the tax burden off of individuals. So that's, how I think about it, and why I would like to see a program that works well. I just don't know if it is what it is yet.
Is
That's
connectivity, broadband, part of the whole problem in attracting business? Growing business?
Yes, but not for this program.
Not for that program.
Yeah, Dwight?
I'm thinking about the flip side, and it goes along with VEGE, is that I'm a nonprofit. I run the weatherization program for CVOEO, and our biggest problem is no workforce. So how are we addressing that? What are we doing? It's like pulling teeth right now, and if you get a new employee, generally you're stealing from somebody else. So
Yeah, there's no easy answer to that. I mean, there's more jobs than there are folks that are looking for work, if you will. We're still trying to understand why people have taken themselves out of the workforce. I think the pandemic has changed people's perspective on how they view work. Certainly housing is an issue.
as I said, because a colleague of
Huge issue.
mine,
Yeah,
she
housing.
lost 3 employees last month, my other co-director,
Yeah.
because they lost their housing, whether it was breakup or whatever, and they had to move back with their parents, out of state.
Yeah, and I think, there's a lot of challenges around childcare right now.
Oh, that's my topic.
And,
That's
so it's not one thing, right? It's a combination of things, and we're looking to address it, but, solving a housing problem that's been in the making for
A very long
probably a
time.
couple decades,
Yeah.
and somehow try
I was
to
gonna say, housing's
fix
always
that
been difficult in Vermont.
and
It's
try
not
to
like it
fix
just
that in the short
started.
term is a difficult thing. And we're putting a lot of money into housing, and that goes across homeless piece, rental assistance. We've got a program that's very successful right now that instead of building housing, well, in addition to building housing, is providing money to folks that have properties that probably don't meet code or something like that, so they're not available on the market for rentals. So we're providing that assistance to the people to fix up houses, things like that. We've got bills in the Senate right now. I don't think there's one in the House right now. It's looking at some of the designations that we've done over the last 10 years about village downtowns, and
There's
where
two
there's
in the
certain
House right
rules
now.
and regulations that are somewhat redundant to Act 250. So should we be making it a little easier for folks to develop housing in downtown locations? That comes with issues too, because if it's a small town, that might be a good candidate, but they don't have water and wastewater infrastructure. You kind of need that to do the building. So, there's a number of issues, but we definitely hear it.
And one
I
of,
would- yeah,
one of
go
the
ahead.
reasons that people are not so excited about veggie right now is when you have such a tiny workforce, should you be incentivizing job growth? Because we don't have enough people to fill the jobs that we already have. So that's come up in committee also, should there be limitations on when the program is actually running or not, based on unemployment?
And we were watching on the news just before we came here that Beta was in New York trying to
Recruiting.
scoop up folks when they're not in our tech centers. So.
Yeah, well, part of your issue probably might be that maybe you don't have enough people that have the education,
I
certifications.
don't need education for my.
What's that?
I'm an employer that they don't need education. I will teach them everything they know. It's
Okay.
just that there aren't people there.
Yeah,
Um,
okay.
Other questions?
I'll speak to, it seems like there's a couple of us on the childcare bill.
Yeah.
So I work in childcare and we're watching this bill very closely because obviously childcare in Vermont is in crisis and has been for years. And while I am appreciative of all that Vermont has done for childcare, I have some things that are wonderful with this bill and some things that are concerning. I am curious, Edye, if anyone reached out to school districts before the bill was introduced about UPK.
So, I have heard concerns from school districts
Yeah.
about the bill also.
So the thing that we heard today was perhaps that part of the bill has been tabled or maybe tabled for now and will focus on financial assistance program, which I'll just give you some context. So I work for Ascension Childcare in Shelburne. So we've been around for 30 plus years. We're NACE accredited, 5-star. We're licensed for 75. We have 52 children right now because we don't have enough teachers. We've shortened our hours because we don't have enough teachers. Tuition for us is $390 a week. So if you do the math, that's $20,000 a year. It is more in the state of Vermont to pay tuition to childcare than it is to send your child to an in-state college. And then childcare teachers are among the lowest paid. So it's definitely the need for assistance to grow, but I don't think taking 4-year-olds out of private programs and putting them all in public school is the answer. So that's my piece.
Beth, do you have something you want to
I
add?
would just second that. I would totally agree. You've got to figure out your facility and your staffing before you make a big decision like that.
Yeah.
Because I think the private schools are having enough trouble keeping, I mean, Poker Hill is keeping their staff, that's not a problem, but, you know, if you take all the 4-year-olds away, I don't know what the program's gonna do, probably fold.
It's you're taking away 4-year-olds, which is then
Which
you
is
get
the
into
bulk of the
ratios. So you can have one teacher with 10 children, and so you want to increase infant and toddler spaces. The ratio there is 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. So you need to double your workforce that's not there.
And you need a different kind of facility to
Yeah,
to
yeah. You need
host. To host.
diapering facilities,
Right, and a
smaller
different bathroom
chairs,
and
smaller
everything,
toilets.
different everything. So you'd have to completely retrofit your
Yeah.
whole facility. And it's not necessarily what facilities want to do. So it's, I hope it's really considered carefully and not just jumped into it. It seems like Act 166 has only been going for 5-6 years maybe.
It's
And
10
it seems
years,
like you
yeah.
haven't really given it a chance, because it seems like it's doing well, but maybe it just needs to be tweaked and given more support, and certainly better funding for subsidy for kids that don't, you know, that need more than just what 166 gives.
Yeah, the you know, the legislative process, what starts out as a bill doesn't necessarily end
I
up that
understand
way.
that, but there's a lot of concern and panic.
Oh,
among
I
teachers.
hear you, but there's also a lot of opportunity to provide feedback in that
Absolutely.
process.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate the goal to give every child an opportunity to go to school. I mean, there's nothing more wonderful or more in my heart that I'd like to see happen. But I'd like to see it done in a really responsible way that doesn't, I mean, you've got a lot of, probably over 100 private centers, or more than 100, that, you know, serve a very important function and do very good work and have been for years and years, 30, 50 for Poker Hill,
Yeah.
50 years. It's a long time. And it's, you know,
I appreciate that you came today for that
Yeah.
feedback. It's not obviously in either of our
Yeah. I
committees,
know
but
it's
we
not,
can
but
talk
we-
to people
but
in the
I
hallway.
wanted to give you the
and- yeah,
feedback. 'Cause
really
you're our
appreciate it.
representatives, and
Yep.
I mean, Underhill Jericho has the ID school. Aren't we lucky? We could house our 4-year-olds, but I wouldn't imagine most school districts have that whole extra building sitting around.
Yeah, and there's a wait list also, so,
And,
yeah.
and is a public school building really the best place for a 4-year-old? I don't happen to think so, but, you know,
You'd have to change everything.
you'd have to change everything. It's a whole different set of furniture and equipment and learning materials, everything. It's a huge expenditure. And private schools already have all this stuff. I would just hope that you work with the people in the field very carefully.
A lot of people have raised not these specific questions, but lots
Yeah.
of different
I'm
questions.
sure,
So
I'm sure.
it's a great starting point. It's a great place to start the conversation. And
Mhm.
as Trevor said, I don't think it's going to end the way it started.
So,
So,
sure.
Most of it's happening on the Senate side right now, I think,
is it?
Yeah.
yeah. And is that Senator Hardy? I'm trying to think who's got Ed.
No, she's
It
not.
may not be in Ed, it might be in, anyway,
Yeah.
yeah. We all talk to each other.
I know you do. Thank goodness. We do live in a brave little state.
Well, you know, and that's, you know, part of the struggle and challenge we had during the pandemic, right? When we were in remote and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, we you know, do committees, but we also spend a lot of time in the hallways and over coffee and talking about these issues, even though that particular bill may not be in our committee, but we have an interest, or we're representing the views of our constituents and things like that, so it's important. Other questions?
Yeah, Bernie, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I have two questions, if I can. First is, I don't know how you're posting your updates to us Sherwood Underhill Hill people. I would like to see you use the Mountain Gazette. Other legislators do use it some. Maybe you're using some social media I'm not aware of. But,
For this?
Any updates going on in the
Oh.
legislature with you two and
Yep.
your Sherwood Underhill community?
Yeah, I've been having a little issue getting my government front porch forum persona set up. I think I'm set up now, so I can start doing weekly posts, but I've been having a little bit of a hiccup getting it set up, probably because of the school board and personal and other front porch forum personas that I have. So
Yeah.
I'm working on it. And I do appreciate the question, because we do need to do better, weekly notices to you on what's going on. So
It's,
appreciate that.
I find it's a challenge because of so many issues that are out there. And I do encourage you, and I agree with Edye, we get very busy in our days, and evenings and weekends and things like that. And, if you do have very specific issues, certainly feel free to reach out and do our best to respond.
I'm not so much looking for specific issues. I'd like to hear from both of you. The Mountain Gazette comes out every other week, more or less, and as a way to support the local paper.
Yeah.
I'm not on Front Porch Forum. Most people probably are, but I'm not. But I really don't know what's going on down
Yeah,
in
and
Montpelier necessarily. And
I suspected if I was going to do that on a more regular basis, I'd use Front Porch Forum, because I think that's the medium that most people use in our community.
the other question I have is the Fish and Wildlife Department has come under criticism because of how they use that. The advisory board that they have there to kind of set policy and things like that is kind of under, in my opinion, deserves criticism. And I guess there has been some legislation to try to address that. It seems to be a group that doesn't necessarily reflect, in some ways, good science, and just reflects a smaller, minority group of people in the state. And wondering what kind of legislation is up there to try to address that, and where you two stand on that.
Well, the only legislation I'm aware of that's currently being considered is a trapping to do away with, or modify. Maybe it's not to do away completely with trapping, but I think a lot of people are concerned about pets being hurt and just cruelty to animals. I guess probably the best way for me to frame this. And but the larger issue is, and what Bernie's speaking to, is that Fish and Wildlife Department, we have a commissioner, and they have staff and biologists and scientists and things like that. But there's a separate Fish and Wildlife Board. And I think a lot of us feel that they have outsized power over the running of the department. And it's always been a criticism, in my opinion, been a criticism of the board and the makeup of that board. It's mostly consumptive users. And what I mean by that, hunters, trappers, fishermen. And doesn't necessarily bring in folks that may be participatory in terms of whether you're a photographer or someone just likes to hike or whatever the case may be, right? And sort of bring that perspective. I also think that there's been a criticism of the board that there's not enough folks that have objective scientific credentials to respond to issues that are there. I think you need to understand that everyone that's on that board is appointed by the current governor, or when those vacancies come up. So that's part of that. I know that in the past there's been an attempt to change that structure, right? And but it has not been successful. And that's because the administration, and again, I'm being a little bit general about that, but the administration is not wanting to go there. And the commissioners that have been appointed, again, my opinion, have touted that line and are very firm in their position about that. and seem unwilling. And I've had very frank conversations with the prior commissioner that was there. I haven't really done much with the current commissioner. And said to him, because they have groups out there, advocacy groups, on the hunting and sportsmen's coalition side and what have you, and they have people who run those organizations. And sometimes they're their worst enemy, their own worst enemy in terms of the op-eds they put out there, because there are some groups that are very vocal about anti-hunting and trapping and things like that. And so they're always responding to that, and I think they missed the middle ground in this conversation. And but that's where we are right now, and I don't see changes. I think the trapping bill will have some traction, but that's not the bigger problem as I see it. So,
No, it's not, in my opinion, it's not the bigger problem.
what's that?
I agree, it's not the bigger, in my opinion, it's not the bigger problem. It's
Yeah.
just not being,
But
current administration is happy to wear what,
Yeah.
more or less what the way it is, and I just,
yeah,
I feel it's not a good.
but there have been a lot of folks are sympathetic to how you feel about these things.
Does the legislature have any control? Can they do away with that advisory board or change its structure?
There's been attempts to do that, and we haven't been successful yet. Now, depending on your ideology, and I don't claim to know everybody's place there, certainly the administration has less ability to veto legislation that comes out of the majority of the House now. So whether that plays into the equation over the next couple of years will be interesting. But I don't know that. I used to be on natural resources for 4 years. I understand the issue and had these conversations.
This trapping bill has been up for quite a few different sessions, hasn't it? And for some reason, hasn't gotten passed. That's true, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah, it really seems like it's time.
Well,
Like it's way past time. So let's
again,
hope.
there,
I know, it's not you, I'm sure you're voting for it, but I hope that you can push for it, because I think it's really important.
we'll see where it goes. And you know, again, I think there's a lot of support in the House for this. I don't think the support is, I think there is support in the Senate, but it's not as strong, it's not as visceral, which is
Well,
interesting.
We'll have to lobby our senators then, won't we?
Well, well, I think our senators
Fine, right.
are okay.
I'm sure they are.
Anyway, okay.
So I have something, I wrote something because it's easier for me to do it that way. And this is regarding the closing of the libraries at our state colleges. So I'll read it. So it must be some kind of karma today. I walked into my library to pick up a requested book and found not only the book with enhanced print, but our town report and a book from the Vermont Council on Humanities, Vermont Reads. I read the sign that reminded me that today my legislative representatives would be present this evening to discuss what is happening at the State House. A regular smorgasbord of democracy in action. I am reminded daily of what a brave little state Vermont is. But lately, something quite disturbing has come to the foreground, and that is the closing of print libraries in our state college system. To say I'm appalled is way too weak a response. Around the United States, I'm watching the abandonment of a diverse education with banning of books, and what is now being proposed with one stroke. Oh, sure, it is said, you can now Google whatever you want to know and read digital copy of textbooks, etc. So easily it can all be replaced and or removed. Sure, soon, with a few clicks, pizza will arrive at your door. Why bother to learn how to cook? Your clothes can come in the mail, no need to shop locally. Oh, but the joy of browsing through books, discovering new ideas, reading beyond your syllabus, the synthesis of new ways of approaching questions, problems. Not all will be in textbooks. To spark the imagination. Let's see if I can get my next page. Spark the imagination, stay there. Maybe from a work of fiction, a poem, or a work of art. Today, as we struggle to combine empathy and compassion with the costs of housing the unhoused, We are going to need problem solvers who look beyond the engineering of a house to how communities grow. As a state, we are struggling to educate the young so they join the workforce here. I ask, why are we denying the very essence of a good education? Let them wander through the stack of books with librarians as their mentors. And P.S., do you believe a walk in the woods can be replaced by a screen and a pair of glasses?
We have the Vermont State Colleges in our committee tomorrow. No, it's fine, that's fine. And I'm sure there's more than one person on our committee that shares your sentiment. And I'm sure it'll be part of, it's a budget testimony, it's about their budgets and things like that, but we know that this is going to be a topic of conversation. I think a lot of us feel that this has not been handled well at all. And so I just leave it there. I think a lot of us are concerned about this.
Who do I send this on to if I type it up?
I'll take it.
Was that solely
seemed like
a budgetary decision to close the libraries?
Oh, no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, oh, by the way.
Yeah, no, I'm
They're
just
coming
curious
in
if that
to talk
was-
about their budget. I suspect that we'll be asking why, and they'll probably have a financial reason behind that somewhere. I don't know what that might be and how that'll be taken by the committee members.
You always wonder when it's done like this, is this I'm drawing a lot of attention so I get the attention that I need? And did
I hear
it
that
have to
part.
be, right, did it have to be done like this? You know, it just,
I also question the equity of it all, and you know, rebuilding the university to be one place and a lesser tier system that would educate a different category of student. And I kind of resent that separation that way.
Well, if you're talking about UVM is no longer a place for Vermont students. Our son went there in the business school, and he was one of 2 Vermonters in the class, his business class, which is shocking. I attended UVM, and we were, it was 60% Vermonters, 40, and it's much the opposite now. So UVM is way different than.
Yeah, so I'm hearing that too. I don't like that happening.
I was just curious how the chancellor got to make that decision all by himself. Or it just seemed like a very, and I was listening to Vermont, the sharing show, and people were really upset, and he was like, well, he just had made this decision. It was like,
That's a new position. Of course, there's been a lot of restructuring
wait, I
of
know this. I
of
know.
what's happening. So, and I don't think I've met this individual before.
Well, it just feels like, yes, it needs to be,
Yeah, but there's a lot of issue here. There's a lot of issues here, so.
definitely.
But I don't have good answers for you
No,
right
I didn't
now.
say you would, but it's good that they're coming in tomorrow, so you can find out, because
Yeah.
I think it will impact people's decision, Vermonters' decisions to send their
Vermonters'
children to
decision.
Castleton or Linden or Johnson. Why would they go there if they're not even gonna have a library? This one woman was like, well, I'm gonna go to SUNY
Go to
Albany
school
then,
in
I'm
New
not gonna
Hampshire."
go to Castleton. I was planning to go, but I'm not gonna go if you're taking away the library.
Yeah, I'm afraid too they'll go out
Out
of
of
state.
Where they
you know,
can find a
New
lot.
Hampshire, New York, and they'll stay there and get their education there and
And
stay
stay.
there, become part of their workforce.
That's right.
And I feel like, here we're talking about our workforce and educating people for the workforce, but we're destroying the state systems.
Both of our children, one's already out of state, the other one's headed out
Where
in
did they go?
December, so.
Massachusetts.
I'm sorry?
Our two boys, one's already out of state, and the other one is headed out at the end of the year, so.
Yeah.
I know a lot of other folks in the same boat with their children.
I would think that would affect your Commerce Committee as well, when we talk about,
we're spending a lot of time trying to understand how to develop the workforce, how to keep, we import students, right? Like as we were talking about, we
Yeah.
import students into Vermont for college. And how do we get them to stay? And we are trying to figure that out. And I don't know that there is an answer. I mean, to have a good job here is an answer, right? But if you can't afford to live here because you can't get a house, you know, that's a problem.
You can't get childcare for your kids, or?
Well, this is pre-childcare, where you
Right,
still have
right.
to be able to, and, you know, I mean,
But it's,
it's just, there's a lot,
It's all
right? There are a lot of
related.
layers, there are a lot of pieces,
Right.
and we have to start chipping away at it. We have to just start fixing it.
Other questions?
I have one about the Affordable Heat Act. My question is, have you, when it comes up, please, and it's not really a question, I guess, it's more of an ask, that you really understand the numbers that are being put out there, because it's not gonna be affordable. As I'm a low-income advocate, and I hear numbers that were bandied about that it's gonna be $5,000 per house to put a heat pump in. Well, that's one heat pump. Our house takes 3. Edye, I think yours would probably take 4. So that's, $16,000 to $20,000. And then, the cleaning of it every year is $800. So just please, when it comes onto the floor, understand all the numbers and what it's actually going to cost. Because it's much more than what's being put out there.
I know I will. I'm sure Edie will too. Take a look at it closely. So, did you have a question?
This is more of a general question. I really have very little knowledge in this area, but I have a lot of interest. I know that there is a lot of committee discussion, at least beginning, about making changes to the sheriff structure in the state. I'm just curious what you all are hearing in Montpelier and what you think might happen this session in that regard.
I'm hearing that there's a lot of concern about what's happened out there and what is happening and what has been happening with sort of the structure of sheriffs. Part of that's driven by the fact that they're quite independent in their structure and their governance, and they're and of course they're regional, right, and local or countywide. At the same time, they're struggling with workforce issues just like everybody else. For instance, today I have the criminal justice system, so I have the sheriffs would come under the state's attorneys as part of my budget portfolio. But I was listening to testimony from judiciary, which is the court system, and their inability to get deputies at the courts for security purposes, right? They have a need for 6 in Bennington County, you can only get 2 right now, so there's a number of issues. But we've all read about some of the less than ideal circumstances that we're seeing in some of this transition of power. I mean, there's, 6 new sheriffs now in the state, which is quite a changeover. And in that transition, it's not pretty, right? I mean, so I don't have an answer for you where it's gonna end up.
Do you think there'll be legislation that will come out of committee or at least be passed out of committee for your consideration?
I haven't actually seen
I think,
legislative.
I don't know if
You?
it will this session, but I think it will next session. I'm hearing a lot of discussion. I'm hearing 2 different directions right now. One of them is, do we need sheriffs? Do we need elected police, right? Is that a need for the state? The other is, if we do need them, what are the real types of boundaries that we can put around them to ensure that, they're fiscally responsible, that they're, responsible to the community, that, that there are appropriate guidelines around the job. And I don't know which direction folks are gonna really go with. I have a feeling it's the second one, because, we're so independent and we really want local control and we really want to be able to, places want to be able to elect their sheriff. But that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing those directions, and nothing, I haven't seen any bills, I haven't seen anybody, I haven't heard anybody saying, I'm gonna put this request in to get it. So I have a feeling it will be next year this time, and not necessarily for, by May this year.
In the popular press that I've read, so take that for what it's worth, it seems as though the Constitution, the state constitution, sort of creates, doesn't give you much latitude in terms of the first choice you were talking about.
Correct.
But it also gives the sheriff's offices a lot of latitude in terms of how they run their business. So the state constitution says they must be there. And it also gives them, like, something I read said that state constitution said that they can impose like 5% surcharge for the sheriff or for the sheriff's department's use. Financially, it just sounded very, I don't know, unprofessional.
Yeah, I think to Edie's point, I think it's the latter. I think you're gonna see a lot more regulation and less discretion on the part of sheriffs. And their ability to sort of take a cut of the action kind of thing.
That's certainly the impression that you get from reading the
Well,
popular press.
and quite frankly, when we take testimony, my committee doesn't take testimony from the sheriffs. We hear from the state's attorney's office that the sheriffs are part of, right? But the sheriffs do go into the judiciary committees. They might go into corrections and institutions and those other committees. And there are a couple of sheriffs that come into the State House on a regular basis to talk to those issues. But those are the good guys. I'll put it this way: those are the good guys, right? And we see that in other organizations that are sort of county based, right? The people we see in the State House are the ones that have their act together and run good programs and things like that. So I'd be kind of curious to speak to those two folks, and I haven't had that opportunity yet to see what they're thinking about this. But I think Edie's right. I think we're going to see some
Guardrails.
more guidance and more regulation around what they can and can't do. So
Well, I hope they come up with, I watch the agendas for the committees to see what's being considered, and I listen to some committee proceedings based on that. And I have noticed that there's just been a lot of committee discussions with, not attached to bills, but
yeah.
Discussions about sheriff reform. So that is part of why I asked the question, just because it's obvious that somebody's doing a lot of talking about it anyway.
Yeah, I'm also, I'm on two other committees besides my Appropriations Standing Committee. I chair the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which is all the rulemaking that all state agencies and departments do. I oversee that process. And I'm also on the Justice Oversight Committee. And in that committee, we have those sheriff conversations, things like that. So. But that particular committee is not during the session. That's an off-session committee.
I can't remember which committee has been having all these, I just can't remember. I look at them all every week and I can't remember which one it was.
It's judiciary and government operations
Okay.
and military affairs.
Yes,
That's
it's called the military affairs
It's
one,
government operations and military
Yeah,
affairs
yeah.
is the.
I know it's not judiciary because the things that I am most closely associated with often go through judiciary. So I watch their agenda pretty closely.
So
Other que- I'm
I was
sorry.
going to say, just before, coming out soon probably out of the government operations and military affairs, they're looking at regulations around sports betting in Vermont, which has been illegal so far, and a lot of people are doing it illegally here. So they're looking at putting some regulations around it and some more ways to help people who have gambling issues. So just so you know, that's probably going to be, you'll be hearing more about it in the next couple of weeks. I'm trying to think
I don't know where it's going to land, but
I don't know where it's going to land either. But that's what they've been spending a lot of their time on.
It seems to me that in the next couple of weeks, there may be a bill out of the Healthcare Committee in the House regarding suicide prevention. I've heard a lot of testimony around that, so
Yep.
I certainly, a lot of the things that they appear to be sort of focusing in on, I'm very supportive of, and I hope that whenever that bill actually gets introduced, technically, that you guys will look at it very closely, because I think it has a lot of good things in the draft proposals anyway.
Yeah, I haven't seen, I don't know where it is right now, but I have heard them talking about it. Yeah.
They were doing, they were reviewing a draft, and they had, I can't remember, Eric from the legislative.
Ledge Council, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
can't remember his last name. Anyway, he was going through the bill and they were talking about the legalities of it. So conceptually, I think they seem to have centered in on the things that they are very most interested in proposing, and now they seem to be really focusing in on details as far as I can tell.
Yeah, one of the things that can happen in terms of bills, you know, someone like Edye or someone like myself can sponsor and get other people to co-sponsor a bill, and we put that out there on a particular issue, and it goes through a committee of jurisdiction and goes through the process. In some cases, a committee will say, we have an issue that we want to address, suicide prevention, right? Is that healthcare or human services?
It's healthcare.
Healthcare. And so they might be working on a committee bill, which is different than a bill that we would introduce. And they have a little bit more leeway in terms of when they can introduce it and cross it over to the other body. They get a little bit more flexibility with that.
You spark another process question. So if these are too much in the weeds, just say so, we don't have to. But I noticed that some topics that come onto the committee agendas are typically topics like suicide prevention. They take lots of testimony, but it's not really attached to a bill number. And then other committees, they're talking about specific bill numbers that appear already to have been introduced. So is that the difference, right? The committee can take up a topic, or they can take a bill that's been assigned to them for consideration?
But, well, yeah, and the committee chair controls that process.
No.
Now, some of them control the process themselves or with their vice chair, and some committees operate a little bit more democratic, and they'll say, committee members, what is it you want to be working on, and things like that. So
But it's the chair who calls the shots.
Exactly. And if you see something on their agenda that doesn't have a bill number, okay, if you look on the House committees, they're all H right now, because it's Senate to Senate, because nothing's crossed over yet. If it's just a topic area, it could be preparation for a committee bill, or it just might be that something's hit the news, and they just want to be talking about it, and may not progress to it.
So the suicide prevention one's a good example. It started out with just topics, several days of topics, and like expert witnesses from different areas. And today, when they're talking about language, now they're talking about House 260. Although they are clear to say that that's just for now, it hasn't been introduced, but they've sort of given it a placeholder number. So it's at least in the committee for their discussion purposes.
It's likely a committee bill, yeah.
They're turning it into a bill. It seems as though from the conversation anyway. Which I mean, the process thing is very interesting to me. Having been interested in legislative things for a few years in this state and elsewhere, I just find if you don't understand the process, then you just can't figure out what's happening.
And, I mean, our committee has had a few folks come back with reports that were requested from last year. And so we've had reports on updates on what's happening. So that's been another thing that you can hear in committee. And I remembered the other bill that we've been working on, which was a brand new business that I've never heard of that's been happening in Vermont. It's called Earned Wage Access Services. And it's been unregulated in Vermont, and it's regulated in just a few states, and we're looking at putting regulation on it. So it's a way for folks who have regular wages, you get paid, every other week or so, to access that money a little earlier. Not payday loans, because we've regulated them out of the state, but there's a free service and there's a minimal pay service, and some businesses in Vermont actually already contract for this for their employees, and some employees are already doing this on their own, and there's no regulation. So that's the other thing that I've been learning about and jumping into and figuring out how we're going to regulate that in Vermont.
I just want to go back to sort of the report piece, okay? We're pretty good at telling agencies and departments that we want a report from you, okay? When we do legislation, we do that a lot. I think a lot of us joke a little, well, not a little, but a bunch about, yeah, we get these reports, but who reads them kind of thing, right? But if you do have a particular, let's say you really care about the environmental issues, then you can go to the website for environment and energy on the House side, or natural resources and energy on the Senate side. And on the front page of their committee website, there'll be a link to reports. And you can click on that and you can see all the reports over the last handful of years. Actually, it's usually based on session. So you may have to go back to a prior session to see what happened in 21, 22. But, you know, if you have certain things that you're interested in, those reports are quite well done. It's just that we can't read them all. We
I
just get
think
so
that's
many.
on the same page that they post their agendas.
Yes.
Yes.
So every weekend they post the agenda, so you can look at that and see what they're going to be talking about in the upcoming week, who their witnesses are, or the testimony that they're going to hear. And then you can, you can live stream the committee proceedings off that same page. And they record those committee sessions. So even if you're not able, like if you work during the day or whatever.
It's funny, I thought you were going to say if you're not able to sleep, you can turn it on.
Well, I'm telling you, you can turn it on like you turn on the radio while you're washing the dishes, and you can just listen to them talking, you know, and usually you can get like a time slice of what you're interested in, so it's not like you're listening to all of it, but you can listen to the parts that are most
Yeah,
of concern to the issues that you're most interested
those are all YouTube.
in. They are, yeah.
And it's one of the things that obviously we went through the pandemic and we had a full year of being on Zoom and what have you. And since we've been back, we've sort of maintained, not sort of, we have maintained a hybrid system. We have all the technology in all our committee rooms. And that's actually been a bonus because we've continued to make that available to the public. So
I think it's a great public service.
you know, so you can always go check and see what's happened on a particular issue and what have you. The other thing too for us as committees is that, let's say somebody wanted to provide testimony as a committee on either a bill, a budget item, or something like that, and they live in Brattleboro, right? And so it's a lot easier for them to zoom in to the committee meeting and participate that way. And you know, the other thing too that you may not think too much about, but Edye hasn't experienced this quite yet. As we get more into the session and we start having a lot more bills on the floor and activity on the floor of the House, then that disrupts all of our committee agendas. So people can travel, well, in the old days I say, people would travel but then not get to do the testimony because we're on the floor. Have to come back the next day or something like that. So, you know, some of the silver linings of sort of what we went through with the pandemic.
The only feedback I would say about the recorded committee sessions is that some of them are great. The audio quality is great, you know, it's easy to hear who's speaking, it's easy to follow, and then others of the committees, I don't know if it's because of the technology in that particular room that they meet in or what, but they're considerably more difficult in terms of the audio quality in particular. Lots of paper shuffling and people talking in the hall or, you know, whatever, so you have to kind of just...
It's good feedback, and it would be helpful for the, you know, for the building tech folks to know that.
Senate Judiciary Committee audio quality is really not good. It's the worst of any of them that I've taken a little bit of time to listen to.
And I was going to say, while we're talking about before, just this meeting right here is being live streamed. So if you know folks who couldn't make it or who want to ever join the next time we do this, you could join us through Zoom tonight. So we could take questions. That's, you know, part of the screen and the owl and the mic. And so I just want everyone to know that, you know, if you're not feeling like you want to be around people and you still want to talk to us, or you only have a certain amount of time, or you know other folks who are just not as comfortable and want to be a part of this is open for that. And we're really grateful to MMC TV and the library for making this happen for us. So.
Yeah, we're doing a hybrid thing here too. So. But to your point, just aside, We have upgraded all the microphones and stuff like that in the committee rooms, and actually they're super sensitive. So if I'm having a little conversation with you here, they can hear it.
Maybe they're too sensitive. I
Well,
don't know.
when you,
Yeah.
and that's right, we actually we have talked about reduced paper shuffling and things like that, because it does pick up all that
It's not so much the
stuff.
side conversations, although every once in a while you'll pick one of those
Yeah.
up. You're trying to listen to the testimony and you can hear half of what, but mostly I guess it's noise in the hall. It's like being in high school when you hear the kids in the, passing in the hall between classes and stuff.
We can't do much about that, so, yeah. Any other questions?
We're really grateful for all of you for coming out tonight, so thank
We're
you.
grateful to you.
It's good to
We're
see
grateful
you.
For providing this opportunity.
For your long day of coming here.
Yeah, please be in touch.
Okay.
I actually have business cards, it's very exciting.
You do?
I do.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.